Hello and welcome to Conversations. I'm Jim Below, your host. Very pleased to have joining me today Dave Borneman, the manager for the Natural Area Preservation, part of the Ann Arbor Parks and Recreation in Ann Arbor.
Yep.
Welcome to Conversations.
Thank you, Jim. Good to be here.
And what is Natural Area Preservation first?
So we are part of the Parks and Recreation Department. We've been around since 1993, and our mission is to protect and restore Ann Arbor's natural areas and to foster an environmental ethic among its citizens.
It sounds like you've got the code down well. What does that mean, though?
So the city has about 159, 160 parks and covering about 2,000 acres, more than 2,000 acres. Of those, probably 1,300 acres are undeveloped parkland. It's forests, wetlands, prairies. So those are the areas that we take care of at Natural Area Preservation, or NAP, as we call ourselves.
So as a part of parks, people often think of parks as being the more active, the more involved areas of whether it be sort of recreational use or designated, land for baseball and soccer fields and that. But you're focusing on the majority of the land which is not developed.
That's true. You're right that Parks and Rec involves a lot of active recreation activities, but there's a whole lot of people who enjoy going out for walks in nature, whether it be bird watching or looking at wildflowers or looking at butterflies or salamanders or just enjoying the time out in nature.
How did you get into this? In other words, what background did you have and also interests that led you into this aspect of you say, the open land?
Right. Well, I grew up on a farm in Illinois, so I've always enjoyed the outdoors, and we had a little patch of forest on our farm that I would escape to after school and go commune with nature there, so that kind of instilled in me a love for nature. I went off to college and got a undergraduate degree in environmental education and field biology. I worked as a naturalist at some nature centers in Wisconsin for a few years. Then I went back and got a master's in something called conservation biology, where I learned really how to manage these natural areas to keep them wild and free of invasives and to try to help restore the native ecosystems.
So in Ann Arbor, how is it determined if parkland is going to be natural or active use or designed use?
Yeah, we pretty much know as when we acquire a piece of property. Many of us on the staff are involved in looking at it. If there are significant natural features there, meaning big trees and native forest fragments or wetlands or prairies, then we know that it's going to be something that we take care of. If it's abandoned farmland or land that doesn't really have a lot of ecological significance, and if it's in an area where we need more active recreation for playgrounds or something, then they would do that. It's kind of a negotiation.
And in that, does the city still acquire new parkland? There's not a lot of, say, open space left in Ann Arbor itself.
Sure. I've been with the city for 25 years, and certainly that the amount of new parkland that we acquire ebbs and flows with the development around town. Back in the 90s, when there was more active development, it seemed like we were getting in larger tracts of parkland. Then there wasn't a lot of new land acquired for a while, but now we've been acquiring some additional land in recent years as the economy's picked up again.
So, and so some of it has to do with availability of neighborhood-type park in new areas, and then as you say, what is there now?
Yeah.
And if there's something significant as far as environmental or natural, it tends to stay that way. Yeah. Ideally.
But you're right, there's not a lot of large tracts of land left in Ann Arbor. Although if you look at a map, there are still some parcels, some township parcels and undeveloped tracts of land. We're getting new land up in the northeast part of town now through some of the developments up there along Nixon and Duvarn in that area.
Now, with natural area preservation and working with the parks, it's not that the land area is not maintained. It's not that it just sort of sits there and whatever happens, happens. What type of use is encouraged in the different natural areas?
Sure. So these are city parks, and these are places just like I had a farmland to commune with nature. People growing up in Ann Arbor need a place to go to commune with nature. So none of our parkland is off limits to the public. But with our nicest natural areas, we would at least put a trail in there, provide public access to them.
A trail is not a paved asphalt necessarily trail. Yeah. It's more as, again, you might call it a natural sort of movement.
Right. So it would be a trail that we would lay out that's going to be sustainable, not up and down too steep of hills where they're going to have erosion problems. But we would lay out a trail loop that makes some sense and is going to be take them to interesting places and be something that's sustainable over time.
Great. And then also it's going to be used by individuals, by people with, you say, accessibility issues in some cases, people who go jogging. And so you're trying to make it, you say, possible for a wide variety of people to have that opportunity to commune with nature.
Yes, but as you mentioned, the trails are not paved, so many of our natural areas don't have trails that are accessible, that are ADA
In the
accessible.
same way, right?
But we hopefully that it gets people to a variety of habitats where they can see the plants and animals that are out there in that park.
And you mentioned, and I'm thinking Gallup Park, where people will use parkland and develop, the park department will develop it in different ways. That you have natural areas that are part of Gallup Park or an adjoining park, some that are sort of open, sort of spaces for groups to come and gather, and then more playground almost.
Yeah, even in, the natural areas that we work in are not so much created natural areas. These are things that Mother Nature gives us. So in Gallup Park, for example, the areas that NAP's involved in are not the open areas, but as you go down the Gallup Bike Trail, that section of there's some nice prairie between the railroad tracks and the trail, and between the trail and the river. And those are some high quality natural areas that have never been plowed up, are filled with all sorts of rare plants. Several endangered species are in there. So those are areas that we take care of.
Now, you mentioned earlier that one of the things that you work on is dealing with the invasive species, those plants which have come in that are not part of the historical use. First of all, how are those identified?
Yeah. So early botanists who were here a couple hundred years ago did a pretty good job of cataloging the plants that are around here. So botanists have a good sense of what was growing here and in neighboring states. And we also know when new plants arrived from Asia, from Europe. Many of them are brought in for ornamental reasons or horticultural reasons.
And then spread.
And they spread. And of Michigan's flora, probably a third of it is non-native. It doesn't mean that they're all invasive, but of those species, of those hundreds of species that are not native, there's a small handful that are really pretty aggressive that invade our natural areas. And those are the purple loosestrife, garlic mustard, buckthorn, honeysuckle, those types of things.
And those you will find in Ann Arbor in the different park areas.
Yeah.
And the ideal is to remove them, or at least I won't say cut them back, but reduce their impact on the natural areas.
So the whole process starts with us first going out and doing some inventory work to really assess the quality of the parkland. Some of our areas really are just old farm fields that don't have a lot of rare plants in them. But other areas are really high quality that are mostly native plants and are being invaded by some of these non-native invasive plants. So that's areas where we choose to, we call it draw a line in the leaf litter. We're going to keep those invasive plants from taking over
further
into the nicer natural areas. And how we control them depends on the species. In some cases, we cut them out and dab herbicide on the stems. Some cases, like with garlic mustard, this time of year, we just simply hand pull them. Prescribed fire that we use is a great tool for setting back a lot of those non-natives.
You mentioned the prescribed fire, and this is one time of the year where I would say in the last 2 weeks, I've passed at least 3 or 4 areas where you have the sign saying it's going on.
Yeah.
What does a prescribed fire do, and how does it help the whole area as a result?
Sure. Well, first, it's important to know that Native Americans have been burning this landscape for thousands of years. And so the landscape that existed here when Ann Arbor was founded was a landscape that had been very much shaped by Native Americans and their use of fire for thousands of years. And the fire helps to keep the woodlands open. Even the name Ann Arbor is, this refers to this park-like setting with big oak trees that were widespread, kind of a park-like setting with enough sunlight coming in to keep the wildflowers growing. And the problem has been when you take fire out of the system, we get a lot of non-native shrubs that come in and they shade out the forest floor, so we can't get any wildflowers growing there. And the fire.
So you set up an area that you're going to purposely burn, but you can't control what gets burned. It's really everything, isn't it?
Yeah, everything gets burned. But remember, the native plants have been getting burned by the Native Americans for thousands of years. So they're all, the plants that were here that were native are all ones that are well adapted to fire. Okay. So they can respond quickly to the fire and favorably. So the fire gives a competitive advantage back to the natives and discourages the non-native plants.
And so that's one way of, as you say, both the non-native, but also therefore the invasive species. How large of an area can be, you say, burned at one time?
Yeah. Well, it's we're limited simply by what we can get done in an afternoon. Usually, most of our burns are 5 to 15 acres in there. That would occasionally we might do something larger out on some of our larger parks. But it's hard work to get out to the sites, and we have to make sure when we're done that everything is done smoking. So it involves having crew, staff, and volunteers on site to keep the fire safe and to put everything out when we're done.
Is this the time of year that it's done because you don't have, I would think in August, let's say, everything's so dry potentially, that while you may have a controlled burn, the concern is it's spreading beyond the controlled area?
No, it's not really that, actually.
Oh, okay.
It's because we feel pretty confident about our ability to control them. It's all about doing it during the dormant season before things green up too much. Okay. We need to wait till after the snow melts and before it greens up. And the truth is that even though people do burns throughout the year, throughout the summer, once we get into late May, there's more wildflowers up, birds are nesting, people are out in the parks. It's hot. It's just a lot harder to do the burns in. So most of our burns are done during the dormant season, March, April, first part of May.
Well, we're going to take a short break, come back and look at your role in working with volunteers and how people who watch this and people in the community might help you. Ask our viewers to stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment.
Here at CTN, we offer a variety of different training workshops for our Ann Arbor residents as well as local nonprofits. Learn about different editing programs, Final Cut Pro, iMovie, and even Motion is available. Or how about studio production? You can even sign up for our Hotline Studio workshop where you can direct and produce your own television show. Go online to a2go.org/CTN and head over to our workshops tab. There you can find a link to our convenient online sign-up sheet as well as an in-depth description of what each workshop has to offer. CTN. Connect, create, communicate.
Autism is real! Palestinian politics! Misrational! Beast forehead people! Demonic devices! Diverse viewpoints! Dynamic personalities! 30 minutes! Contact CTN to schedule your show on Access Ann Arbor! And I'm talking to you, buddy!
I just wish there was some place I could watch my favorite local TV shows.
Whoa! Cool, where am I?
You are in a computer terminal.
Who said that?
I am the god of computers. I heard your wish and granted you access to my terminal.
Really? I've always wanted to be inside one of these things. So what's next?
Visit CTN's and the City of Ann Arbor's streaming and video on demand a2gov.org/watchctn.
What do I do there?
Here you can watch city meetings, community produced programs, school board and education programming, and a whole lot more.
Yes! This is great!
The live streams include CTN's 4 channels: government, public, educational, and community. Just click the sidebar for the channel you prefer and click play.
I can watch 4 channels. Cool.
For video on demand, go to youtube.com/CTN Ann Arbor to find your favorite show. Scroll through the mini playlists or simply use the search bar to type in the name of the program.
I wish I knew about this earlier.
Visit a2gov.org/watchctn for CTN live streams and video on demand.
That's great. Now I can go tell my friends. Once I leave.
Goodbye.
Hello?
Hello and welcome back to Conversations. I'm speaking today with Dave Borneman, the manager for the Natural Area Preservation for Ann Arbor. And one of your responsibilities or roles under Parks and Recreation deals with volunteerism.
Yeah.
And first of all, do you find a lot of people wanting to help out with whether it be natural area preservation or the park system in general? And what types of volunteer opportunities are there?
Well, yes, we find lots of people who want to help out with the parks in all sorts of capacities. They can help in our program in natural area preservation, or there's other ways to tie in through the Give 365 program or the Adopt a Park program. So whether your interests are in nature or other recreational facilities or just your neighborhood park, there are lots of opportunities to help out.
And you mentioned with volunteering with the natural area preservation, what types, you mentioned actually going back to the controlled burn, you mentioned volunteers there. How else within NAP do volunteers get involved? And what type, do you have organized programs, or is it make a phone call and we'll see what we can do?
Well, we have a wide range of things. So we, are part of our mission is to really help facilitate the connections between people and parks. So whether your interests are anything that our staff do, volunteers could come out and help with as well. Whether it be being on a prescribed burn, coming to a work day and helping to pull out invasive plants. We have some people who have a certain park that they're really dedicated to. Maybe they've lived next to that park for 40 years and they really want to work in that park, and they become park stewards that are kind of a long-term eyes and ears there for us. They might go out and do their own work in the park, and in those cases we allow some of those people with proper training and check-in by us to use herbicides like we would, to run chainsaws like staff would, so they can really work in a pretty active role there. Right. Other people are involved, maybe not so much in invasives, but they really care about the wildlife out there. We do breeding bird surveys, butterfly surveys, frog and toad, salamander surveys, turtle surveys. So if your interests are in wildlife or in restoration, there's all sorts of activities for you to do.
And you mentioned that, and a group. I work with a school, I know we've worked with you in things. Groups can get together, and is it, I guess I'm trying to get to, you have specific days you're doing certain things, but also if a group wants to get together, they can work with you to arrange when they're available.
Yes, we put out a quarterly newsletter, Natural Area Preservation News, and this is free. It comes out, and there's a calendar in here that lists upcoming work days. This time of year we have 1 or 2 a week, usually on Saturday or Sunday. But besides those public work days, if there's a group that wants to set up something on their own during the week, we work with businesses and schools. We're kind of ramped up now to be able to handle 200 or 300, 400 people at a time. So we've had the entire student body of Community High School and Green Hill School and some others all come out and help on work days.
And in those cases, it will vary as far as, once again, what they want to do and how they want to help and work?
Sure, and the age of the kids and what's appropriate for them, what their interests are. This time of year we get a lot of those groups because we're in the middle of garlic mustard season. Okay. Garlic mustard is one of our worst invading plants. Luckily it's easily controlled simply by hand pulling, and it pulls out of the ground fairly easily. So we can get 400 kids out, we've got 400 pairs of gloves, a bunch of garbage bags, and we can send the kids out after teaching them what garlic mustard looks like, and they can pull us.
And that's something it sounds like could be done by relatively younger students.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, where when you get into issues related to whether, I don't know, do you allow students to use, not chainsaws, but clippers and that as far as maintaining trails?
Yeah.
Age can impact what is available to be done.
Yeah, usually high school kids, maybe junior high, we have loppers or hand saws that we can train them to use if we're doing trail work or taking out some of these non-native shrubs and buckthorn and honeysuckle. They need to cut those out or saw them out and haul them off. So we do that with adults and high school kids as well.
And you mentioned there are some sort of prescribed or identified days. Are there any coming up, let's say, between now and mid-June, over the next month, where you need a lot of people? Because I would assume some you need some people to volunteer, but others you might need as many people as you can get.
Sure. A lot of these are neighborhood parks, and we send mailings out to the neighborhood around there. One of the big ones coming up is our 20th annual Garlic Mustard Weed Out Day on Saturday, May 19th, from 9 o'clock till noon. So we'd love to have lots of people that come out to that day, help us. We'll work in a bunch of different parks.
I would say that's in different parks, not just in one.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so they could contact you and sort of sign up to go to one park or another to work on that.
Yeah, that's a very family-friendly event, so bring the kids along. And
you mentioned that's the 20th annual. How many people will you tend to get out in past years for that type of an event?
Not as many as we get on like our community high school work day.
Okay,
we won't have hundreds, but we'll have certainly dozens of people.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what the latest numbers are. If there are groups that want to come to an event, we're happy to slot them towards those public events where we're already running an event there. But I would guess we'll have across the city anywhere from 50 to 100 volunteers that day.
Great. And looking now beyond natural area preservation, but with the Parks and Rec, are there days that you're involved in as manager or as deputy manager with Parks of bringing the community together to use the parks then?
Oh, sure. One of the big things coming up is Huron River Day in Gallup Park. Usually that's in July. This year we've moved it up till earlier. It's on Sunday, May 20th, the day right after our Garlic Mustard Weed Out Day. So that might catch people by surprise because it's earlier, but a big event like that. We do a Downtown Blooms event, cleaning up the downtown parks and things. So those are all coming up.
And that's something, once again, not everyone sort of recognizes or realizes that you have urban parks as part of the whole system.
Yeah.
And that there are volunteer opportunities there also.
Yeah, Ann Arbor is really fortunate to have a large parks department and a pretty diverse parks department. So whether your interests are in remote natural areas where you won't see a lot of other people or in downtown parks or something in between, we have opportunities for everybody.
What's the biggest challenge for NAP?
Well, ecologically, the biggest challenge is this continuous onslaught of these non-native plant species. I think culturally, kind of one of the biggest challenges, there is still a sense that we should just let nature take its course. So who are we to be managing these natural areas? That we've saved it as parkland, and we should just put a fence around it and let it be. And I would argue that that's not really a good approach. We need to be the stewards of these areas. We've already disrupted nature so much that to say let's let nature take its course is not really a good option for us anymore.
Because what is impeding or what is evasive is not natural. It's because humans have brought in something from the outside.
Yeah.
I mean, it's different than because of climate or the environment. You have a natural movement of plants and movement of different types of things. But in this case, it's humans bringing things in from the outside.
Right, and so now we're taking an active role with cutting out plants, cutting out shrubs, putting fire into an ecosystem, maybe using herbicides, and those are things that are somewhat controversial for some people. So it's the idea that we are managing these areas that's hard for some people to accept.
And with managing, and with the acceptance, the fact that it does take management to keep it possible, what would you like, from an ideal perspective, what would you like to see over the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years, the city do to ensure that that's ongoing? Are there limitations to what you can do now that ideally you might be able to do more of?
We've been pretty fortunate with our funding. We're funded entirely through the property tax millage. So that millage is up for renewal, I think, this fall. So we encourage people to get out and vote. And we invite the public to come and get involved, learn more about what we're doing, and I think our long-term success will depend on how well the community is involved. we don't want to just be the staff out there doing the work. We really want to engage the public and put them back in touch with the
So in that
parks.
respect, education to a certain extent,
Sure.
both as far as opportunities for the citizens of Ann Arbor to get involved, but also education of what needs to be done, what is possible to be done.
Yeah.
Because it's not something that everyone's gone to school to learn about.
Right.
In that sense.
But yeah, we invite people to, you'll learn about this on a work day. If you don't know anything about this at all, show up, and part of what we do is explain why we're doing this work and do a nature hike as part of these work days as well.
And what would you say in your 25 years have you seen or feel most proud of having accomplished?
Yeah, so there are certain parks where we've really, over the 25 years, I've seen a huge improvement.
Yeah.
25 years ago, it was just a wall of invasive shrubs there, and now we can look ahead and see, over time, see how things have changed. We have a photo monitoring program, working with the volunteers as well. That's another opportunity. So seeing some of those parks, places like Furstenberg and Bird Hills and Cedar Bend and Mary Beth Doyle, Barton Park, all these areas that at one time were really seriously invaded by non-native shrubs, and now they're open park-like settings that start to look like maybe what they were 200 years ago.
Right. And that's because of not only NAP, but also the citizen involvement. And a lot of that is because people want that opportunity, want that ability to take in nature.
Yeah.
If that wasn't there, there wouldn't be a need to sort of clean things up.
Yeah. You know, that whole idea of no child left behind, we want to get our kids inside. No child left inside. Let's get our kids out in the parks and help them enjoy nature, and we try to do that as well.
You've mentioned the opportunity for individuals or groups to volunteer. How can they get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of us through the city's website, a2gov.org/NAP, or you can send us an email at a2gov.org. Oh, let's see here. Can I get my email address right? nap@a2gov.org. NAP at or give us a call at 794-6627.
Okay, and that can be anything from volunteering to asking questions.
Yeah.
And that. You mentioned the website. Does NAP have their own sort of website within the website?
Yeah, so go to the city and through parks, and you'll find a link to us and all the activities that we do there, and our newsletters online, as well as the upcoming work days and things like that.
Great. And if you could accomplish anything in the next 30 days, getting as many people involved as possible?
Sure, getting lots of people out to our work days, pulling lots of garlic mustard, getting lots of people involved in our upcoming breeding bird survey and butterfly survey and those activities, and seeing lots of people out enjoying the natural areas.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's always a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Jim. Good to be here.
Great. I want to thank our viewers for joining us today and look forward to your continued support here on Conversations. Thank you.